Let the youth movement officially commence. We discussed some names off the Iowa Wild roster that could have an impact on the Wild roster today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we take a look at some names in the prospect pool that could have an impact for the Wild this upcoming season. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. If today is your first time tuning into Locked on Wild, we welcome you in and hope you'll stick with us here throughout the rest of the offseason. If you're one of the everydayers that listens to this show on a daily basis, we welcome you back. And welcoming back today's guest, Alex Micheletti, joining us for a Monday episode of Locked on Wild. Alex, before we get to our topic today, so we have had a couple of games for the conference finals so far, and all of them have gone to overtime, and both teams that are in the win column have 2-0 leads. What do you think so far of the Panthers and the Golden Knights getting out to the early leads in both series?
Yeah, the Panthers just seem like a team of destiny, don't they? It's unbelievable. The 8th seed Magic getting into the playoffs on the last day of the regular season. And you know, what a story Sergei Bobrovsky has been. Bob has just been playoff Bob mode, just unbelievable saves in every series so far. And Matthew Tkachuk, the Rat King, it's incredible. He's just willing his team to wins, and you're seeing guys like Carter Verhaeghe have huge games, and of course Alexander Barkov. That goal he had the other night where he did the fake in between the legs was just unbelievable on Ronta. One of the goals of the playoffs for sure. And then on the Western side, you know, Vegas, they just seem like the most complete team out of the four remaining. Their D are big. Jack Eichel's playing out of his mind. They have four lines that are, you know, they play really heavy, and they're just really getting to the Dallas defense. You saw Ryan Suter right at the end of that game today or yesterday. It just I don't know what he got lost on the tying goal. That was really tough. And you know, then Dallas did have a chance there in overtime, and Aiden Hill came up big on Wyatt Johnston, and then you know a few minutes later, you know, Chandler Stevenson knocks it home. So it was just crazy. And who would have ever thought? You know, what if I mean, it's crazy. You know, to maybe have you know, possibly, you know, 2 sweeps. You know, there's still a lot of hockey left, but that would be crazy. But could you imagine a Vegas Florida final? The travel for that would be something else for sure.
Yeah, they'd have to put in some extra travel days, but it's been fun to watch, and it's just Vegas is a good test of resolve for a hockey team. They were trailing up until the final couple of minutes in game 2. They end up getting the tying goal, and they end up being able to take those first 2 games against a Stars team that just doesn't lose in those situations. But you get the game to overtime, and Dallas just does not seem to have that same sort of edge that they've had throughout the course of the regular season. So those series continuing to unfold. We'll keep an eye on them as they play out. But as we look at where the Minnesota Wild are at right now, obviously money going to be tight this offseason. There's enough to re-sign some key guys, but you're probably going to end up having to make some moves to try to free up additional money which means there are going to be spots on the roster that could be filled by guys on entry-level contracts. And so we're just going to go through some of the names and just examine what they could bring, what they need to do if given an opportunity to slide into the lineup. Let's talk about the big one, because obviously after what happened this past season, with starting the season with the Wild, things not going well, getting sent down to Iowa. I'm, of course, talking about Marco Rossi. And he had a solid season in Iowa once he was sent back down. But my feeling is that we got to see what we got this upcoming season. And so, what needs to happen for Rossi, both from his standpoint and from the team's standpoint, for this upcoming season?
Yeah, he needs to get stronger and he needs to get faster. And so I'm glad that he's going to try to stick around here, for the most of the summer. I know it's he enjoys going back to Austria, but you just don't get that competition and NHLers over there to skate and work out with, and he can be here with skating instructors with the Wild, and he just really needs to, like I said, stronger and faster. The NHL is a different animal than the AHL. Clearly, it's just, it was. We thought, we were expecting a ton because he led the preseason in points.
Yeah,
yeah. So we're like, here's the breakout Marco Rossi season, and then he just struggled, and then was just stuck in Iowa, and so. Yeah, this is, like you said, this is a put up or shut up year. If he doesn't do anything, then you really have to, take a look at maybe seeing, if there's any takers out there for him. Even though it's tough to say when he's that young still, but you look at his peers around him, and they are putting up in the points in the playoffs. You take a look at Seth Jarvis and then Anton Lundell. He's been incredible for Florida, and Jarvis with Carolina, and then Perfetti's been playing really well, and Dawson Mercer had a breakout season with the Devils, and so you expect, he did have issues with COVID and everything, but this is a huge summer for him to to get faster and stronger and have a really good camp, and he's going to get every shot to play a ton, just with the cap space where it is.
Yeah, and you look at the opportunity, because Mason Shaw, you saw Connor Dewar center some on that fourth line. We saw Mason Shaw center some as well. So, maybe they just go that route to where Dewar is just that fourth line center. But there is an opportunity to fill a center spot on this roster. Now, I think that was part of the issue early on in the season. And there were both sides of it, that Rossi maybe wasn't fully ready to do what was needed at the NHL level, but Dean also not putting him in a great spot to perform. And so I would think you'd want him to be higher up in the lineup, but then also you got to kind of earn that spot in order to be put in those situations.
Yeah, 100%. And so if if you're not strong enough to win draws, that's why he's in Iowa. And it's disappointing when Eck goes down like that, and you aren't even thought of getting in the mix with as a center. That's really disappointing and really eye opening for him too. And it shows you that the coaching staff really really needs to see something to to put faith in him. Same thing with Bill Guerin. So they clearly didn't see enough from Iowa to trust him in the big time in the playoffs with the big club. So yeah, a lot to work on for the young guy.
A lot riding on this season, and so we'll see. I would say that's probably the biggest name that will have an impact. We've got a few others to discuss, of course, on offense, on defense too, and we'll just discuss the plan in net as well, as we look at some names that could potentially have a big impact on the Wild roster on today's episode of Locked On Wild. There is nothing as stressful as trying to buy tickets for a game the day of. And Game Time is here to try to make that process a little easier. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Game Time has a lot of great features, but my favorite has to be the fact that they show you images of your seat view before you purchase your tickets. They also have great flash deals and up to the Game Time tickets. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You can get more with the Game Time guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, your team every day. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, we continue our player eval series, and so you can look for some of the guys on the second line this week. We'll also get to Jake Middleton as well, all coming up here this week as we go through letter grades for the entirety of the team. We'll get to the coaching staff and General Manager Bill Guerin as well. Alex Micheletti is our Monday guest. And Alex, another name that I think could potentially have an impact on the season this year, a guy that we've seen a little bit of over the last couple of years. That is Adam Beckman. Beckman had a great training camp this past year, was one of those final guys, but just didn't end up making the roster. But he has been a call-up guy, kind of that first wave of players to come up with injuries. And every time he's been up, he certainly has looked the part. It's just kind of waiting for that big opportunity to come so that he's able to break through.
Yeah, I think this is the season for him. like we talked about, there's going to be some open roster spots, and he's a cheap contract, and yeah. Every time we've seen him, he's produced. He's had some exciting plays. When, I can remember that Pittsburgh game a few years ago, and it's he's right there. I think he's got the bigger body type, than Marco Rossi. I think he's stronger than him, and I think at least early, I think he'll probably have a better chance at sticking around, with the big club. So I think he's ready to prove it too. He's done everything he can at the Iowa level, and I think he's battle tested and ready. He's been through the grind of the AHL, and so he wants that shot, and he'd be perfect, with a guy like Marcus Foligno and Eck possibly, but you also have Duhaime there too for spots. So there's the nice thing about a lot of these guys is they're interchangeable in roles, so they can fit in multiple lines and spots and maybe special teams too.
And if we recall with Beckman, he was put in a similar situation kind of to what Rossi went through this year, where they had him spend almost an entire season working on more of the defensive aspects of the game. And then you get to this season and he had just another great offensive year for Iowa. And the thing that I like, and I keep going back to this metaphor just to try to kind of sell the point, I keep referring to him as like the James Bond of the Iowa Wild roster. He shoots first and kind of does everything else afterwards. And so if he can just be a guy that's not afraid to shoot, that tends to be a little bit of an issue with this team. And so if he can be that shoot first guy, a little bit of that bulldog mentality, there is a spot for that type of player in a lot of different roles for this team. Because you look not only at the struggles in 5-on-5. How about power play number 2?
Yeah, there was this season there was not a power play 2. It was, well, I mean, the guys that were on there should never be playing special teams. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of spots open on that unit, and he's the type of player too that brings a lot of energy and the type of guy that you're looking for in playoff hockey too. To their motor's always going, and he can hit and be physical because as we know in playoff hockey, we're watching it right now. The 2 series especially, it's physical and it's nasty, and you're gonna have to grind to get goals. They're not always the Barkov goals from the other night, but there's goals going off butts and shin pads, and it's just crazy. So yeah, as we know, playoff hockey, it's chaos, and so he's a type of guy just like Brandon Duhaime too. That's always going 100 miles an hour. You got to keep it in check, obviously, but he's exactly the prototype player that I think Billy Guerin loves too.
Controlled chaos.
Yes.
Like, funnel that chaotic energy and use it for good. Before we talk a little bit about on defense and goaltending, I know there's another guy that you had brought up that I want to just get a little more intel on. That is Daemon Hunt. What do you think the possibility is of him maybe being not necessarily a guy that breaks the roster full time this year, but being one of those call up guys that's ready to go in the event of injury?
Yeah, he looks really close. So, this is a huge summer for a lot of the fringe defensemen on this Wild roster. There could be a couple trades. Alex Goligoski could get moved because he just doesn't play, and so he might just want to go to Bill Guerin, who he played with and has a really close relationship, and say, Bill, can you find me a team? And so that would be a guy that would go out of the mix. Kalen Addison has fallen out of favor with the coaching staff and Bill Guerin. So who knows if he'll try to request a trade, or if Bill, just finds a fresh start for him. And so you also have John Merrill, who was scratched, in that playoff series too. So yeah, it's there could be a spot open or two, and so he's right there. He's a guy that just like you mentioned that might not be full time, but could come up in a pinch if needed. And I really like his game. He's got some offense to him, I believe. And so yeah, he's definitely a guy that you could plug and play in and maybe play a little power play. And it's nice to have those guys that are hungry and want to get to the NHL. And he seems like a really good locker room guy from everything we've seen from him. He's well spoken and character, and he'd be a perfect guy in that locker room for sure.
I like him. Let's talk about the goalie situation after the break, because I know it seems pretty set, but let's just check in on Mr. Wallstedt's status as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild, your team every day. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topal joined by Alex Micheletti. Alex, let's talk goalies, because it seems pretty set with Marc-Andre Fleury returning for potentially his final full-time regular season in the NHL. You've also got Filip Gustavsson. His contract status is still up in the air at this point, but it's hopefully going to be something that is resolved without any sort of aches and pains, which would leave to then have this goalie tandem back at it. Now, the interesting thing has been the wording, in that Fleury has been pretty vocal about, look, I'll do the backup thing. I don't really care. At this point, if it's going to be backing up Gustavsson, who certainly deserves a healthier share of the starts. But you got the guy of the future in Jesper Wallstedt. And with Fleury and Gustavsson seemingly being locked in for another year, it leaves it so that you don't have to rush Wallstedt up. Or do we end up seeing him for a few starts this year?
Well, I mean, the big doubt is could Gustafson get offer sheeted by a team, and then the Wild, can't afford him. If they do that, they do get draft picks, but that's the big, like, oh, could that happen? So if that were to happen and a team does get Gustafson, I still don't think that they would have Wallstedt be the backup to Fleury. I think they would try to sign a veteran and then let Wallstedt cook still in Iowa. He's had his moments for sure. And he was the AHL All-Star. He's Sweden's #1 goaltender in the World Championships right now, and he's looked great. I watched the game when he was playing Marco Rossi, and he stopped Marco Rossi a couple times, which must have just been awkward for him. Rossi actually does look pretty good for a team that has no other NHL guys. So good for Marco for trying to do everything himself. But Wallsted's he's looked great. He's got a personality. We've seen little clips of him when he was practicing with the Wild up here. He's quite the character, doing the wave or bob in his head. He's going to be a fun one to when the media scrums are around him for sure. So yeah, you also have Zane McIntyre there too, who's was a great college goalie at UND and has been a great good pro in minor leagues and a cup of coffee in the NHL a little bit here and there, and Hunter Jones too. So there's some guys there too that can step in if needed. But the future's so bright. I cannot wait for Wallstedt, and I'm okay with Fleury, playing out his final year of his contract. He did that. It was nice of him to, if he wasn't feeling it, that the Wild would be off the hooks. So, but you can see in his mind, why would I turn down that money to to come back? Even that's really good money as a backup or as a 1B. So I out of all the positions that the Wild have, the goaltending is definitely the top of the list for sure. I mean, Wallstedt's the #1 goalie prospect in the entire league. So that's Jed Brackett, man, just incredible work by him.
Here's how I think it'll play out if everything goes according to plan. Gustafson signs, he's your #1. Pencil him in for like 50 starts.
Right.
Fleury the backup, pencil him in for the other 32. And fluctuate from there. So you have those as your 2. If there are short-term injuries, then you go to McIntyre to come up and fill the backup spot. If there's a long-term injury for either guy, that's where it gets interesting. Like if you have an injury that's going to, say, knock Gustafson out for like a month, Fleury out for a month, that's where things get interesting. But I still am of the belief that you probably let Wallstedt do his thing for another year, and then I think just if the results are really good, I think you just let him break camp with the team next year.
Yeah, 100%. I think goalies are more fragile than a forward or defenseman. You really don't want to get them screwed up at the NHL level, and so you're going to wait until he's 100% ready to go. And he's every time they've talked to him about it, he agrees that another full year in Iowa's is the best for him. I think, like you said, if it was a long-term injury for Fleury or Gustafson, and that would be like a Hail Mary call to get him in the net to try to save a season. But it's the best league in the world, and you don't want him just to come in and just get lit up, 7-8-0, because that can really just destroy your confidence. So you don't want to see anything like that. Let him continue to cook. He's looked great there, but you want him to be consistent too. So you don't want him just to flash every now and then. You want him to be 100% ready to go the next Henrik Lundqvist.
Yeah, let him do his thing and just develop that consistency at the AHL level. We did forget one name that could probably have a solid role with his team, Sammy Walker, who showed some real impressive stuff in his couple of call-ups with the Wilds, was an AHL All-Star, and he brings a little bit of that speed component that the team was lacking. They then trade for Marcus Johansson to fill that role. What do we think about Walker's chances to do similar or have similar results with the Wild this season?
Yeah, like you said, the Johansson move really is tough for Walker because that would be the spot that he would take, and so I don't see him as a fourth line guy, and that would be that's where he would probably be competing for a spot. So it's tough for him. It just seems like he's kind of stuck, just kind of like Kyle Rao was, just really good in the AHL, but the tweener just can't get a full-time spot, which is tough for him. But he's proven, he's proven a lot of the doubters wrong, including me. I didn't think he'd get a chance, but when he did, he looked great. And so that's what we want to see though in the AHL is guys taking advantage of being in top line minutes, top power play, and he's proven that. And so I just think you don't want to see him in a fourth line role, but if he makes a team, he can be elevated. Look at Ryan Hartman; he's made his way out, isn't all the way up to the first line, and so it could happen. This team with where contracts are at, he could get a spot, and then like we talked about, a lot of these guys can be interchangeable. So, possibly we'll see. It's going to be fascinating to see what Bill Guerin does because I think he's definitely going to try to clear cap space too by getting some of these fringe players out, and so maybe that gets gets Sammy in. Maybe if Foligno gets moved, that's $3 million off the books that they could move. And so, it's going to be a very interesting summer for some of those guys that have been fan favorites, have been with the team for a little bit here. But that's the good thing about Bill Guerin is, it's a business. He loves these guys, but at certain points you have to make tough love decisions. So yeah, it's very, very interesting.
It's that poker face for your GM to hope that you have a good hand and that you are not sitting like some other teams with jokers.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens, but there will be plenty of other names that get discussed because we've got the draft coming up. And so we're going to use Mondays to tackle a lot of this. I think what we'll do at some point in the future is some bargain bin shopping to where, hey, you've got $1 million to spend on a free agent. What are some names that you could go after? Things like that. We're going to keep the Monday segments open for some of the bigger picture stuff as I sift through the player evals and all that procedural stuff as we navigate the offseason. So make sure you stick with Locked On Wild throughout the duration of the offseason as we'll keep you up to date with everything happening because we do all of these episodes, but then you can be very sure that once something big happens, we'll have you covered with that as well. So make sure you tune in, subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, so you don't miss out on any breaking Wild news or any bigger picture topics that we discuss throughout the week. Once again, if this was your first time tuning into Locked On Wild, thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you for future episodes of the show. If you're an everydayer, we'll catch you tomorrow. Either way, make sure that you stick with Locked On Wild. We have new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.